Graham, from what I know, you were recruited to run for senator. And what was happening? You were driving around in your car and some guy calls you up and say, because we want you to run for Senate. Tell me the story.
No, not quite. No. I was like, my wife and I were down in Brooklyn, Maine, where we shuck oysters at the Brooklyn General Store. And we were driving home. It's about a little over an hour drive. So it was like 9 o'clock at night. And I get a phone call from an unknown number. And it's a gentleman asking if it's me. And I said, yes. And saying that they were at my mother's restaurant. They'd stopped in for dinner. And that they wanted to talk to me about a Senate, a project to recruit a candidate in Maine to run for U.S. Senate. And I've been engaged in a lot of community organizing and through that have made lots of friends around the state in the organizing world. Mm-hmm. So I assumed that they were just calling to ask me about for names. And so I was like, it's late at night. We can't. So if you want to come over tomorrow morning before I go out on the boat for coffee, that sounds good. And they
agreed. What time do you go out on the boat?
Well, I wanted to come over at 4:30, but my wife told me that was too early to invite people over to the house. So I told them 6, I think, or 5:30, something like that. Yeah, they came over and made it clear that they were part of this project with the Maine AFL-CIO, a couple of labor union groups trying to recruit a candidate. And I started listing off names. And essentially they were like, no, you don't understand. We think you would be a good candidate. And my wife and I laughed and said, that's insane, because it is. I mean, we make $60,000 a year. And the Senate is not for people like us, or at least we don't really, I'd never thought of running for United States Senate. But then essentially they came back with the harder sell and an idea about how this could actually look. And at that point, we decided that it was the right thing to do.
Tell me a little bit about your political experience. You referred to community organizing. You're working a long day. Yeah. And tell me about the time that you spent, outside the workday and what you were doing.
In the winter months, I have less going on. I have a lot of projects, mm-hmm. boats to fix, gear to fix. Farming is farming is farming. So you've got your in season where Sure. You're out. I mean, for me, I'm out on the boat pretty much all day long, all summer. It's very busy. In the winter months, starting after December through April, I tend to have a bit more free time. And in that time, I put time into organizing around mostly local economic justice issues or social justice issues. And it's what I've been kind of at the extent of my politics outside of local governance, where I've been the chair of the planning board and also was harbor master. And those were areas that I enjoyed thoroughly. You get to see the outcome of policy, then you get to craft policy based around the very material reality that you engage with, which I actually found to be quite educational. I mean, it is something to be able to write policy, implement it, and then essentially see the outcome of it within a week's time. Only at the local level do I think you actually get to engage with things like that. So.
Graham, tell me a little bit about your family. From what I've read, you, for a very brief time, were at a pretty distinguished prep school.
Very briefly. It didn't last very long.
Yeah, what happened?
I got thrown out.
What'd you get thrown out for?
I didn't go to class. I went to a very small rural middle school, and my mother wanted me to have a better education, I suppose. So she had me apply to a bunch of these like New England prep schools. We got a really good financial aid package from Hotchkiss in Connecticut. So she sent me down there. I didn't want to go. I went down and just I'd never been around that level of wealth before. I just felt very out of place. And then I figured out very quickly that if I didn't go to class, then I got to go home. And that is exactly what happened.
That was the conclusion you drew.
Much to my mother's chagrin.
How did she react?
Poorly. She was very mad. I did not get to go on the family vacation that year. I had to stay home with my dad.
How did they react to your decision to go into the military? And tell me about that.
Yeah, my dad became a teacher so he could not get drafted during Vietnam. He thought the war in Iraq was deeply stupid. I did too, to be fair. So he thought my joining the Marine Corps was or enlisting was not a good use of my time, and he was afraid I was going to go fight and die in a stupid war, like he had seen friends from his generation.
When you look
Vietnam.
back on it, why did you go into the military? If you thought the war was stupid, it was just a thing that a young man can do to rebel in some way?
Since my earliest memories, I wanted to be a soldier. I grew up loving military history. I did Civil War reenacting. I really, I don't know why. I don't have an answer. I think about this fairly often. It was just something that spoke to me. I mean, for me, it was an inevitability. Yeah. After graduation, I was working for the Appalachian Mountain Club. I'd spent 2 years in the professional trail crew in the White Mountains. So I went back to work for the AMC for the summer. And then I deferred a year to go to college to keep my parents happy. But I knew what I was doing. I knew that I wasn't going to go.
How did the reality of Iraq and being a soldier match with what you had imagined?
So I went into it, I think, in many ways more informed and already fairly cynical than most. I read a lot of literature from the Vietnam War in high school. One of my favorite books was A Bright Shining Lie by Neil Sheehan. About John Paul Vann, who was a very competent and great soldier who then found himself in a war that he thought was being fought poorly. So when I got to Iraq, early on, I thought it was working. I mean, I remember coming home from my first deployment and telling people that like I was wrong because I'd been against the war, and I was wrong that I was wrong. I was in fact right the first time around. But I really believe what I interacted with was what I thought were tactical failures. I thought that we weren't doing the thing properly. I really believed in the concept of counterinsurgency. By the time I got out of the Marine Corps in 2008, Petraeus and General Mattis had written the counterinsurgency manual. There was this whole like ream of thinking that the United States military really needed to focus on this counterinsurgency concept. So I started reading all the old writings from the French and the British and Malaya, and I really truly believed that we had just been doing it wrong. That it wasn't that it as a concept was a failure. Is that we needed, and it's so funny now looking back on it because you can read guys in Vietnam having the exact same realization and then coming to the exact same realization that I eventually did too, which is that, it's not a tactical failure. This whole thing is a failed concept. It cannot
strategically,
work. Strategically, it's not gonna work. But you know, when you're young, and you're engaged in something and you want to believe in it, you want to make it work. I threw my heart and soul into it.
Graham, you know, I was thinking about you in the last couple of days, knowing that we'd be talking, and this past Sunday was just a miserable day. You know, the news from Providence, Rhode Island, and then the news from Sydney, Australia, and then the day ending with the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife. And then what followed is the President of the United States issuing a Truth Social post that just betrayed. I mean, it wasn't surprising in a sense, which is part of what's so awful about it.
Yeah.
But it just, the idea that somebody holding that sense of responsibility would say something so morally bankrupt and worse. But we also know that human beings say some pretty stupid things over time. And you've had to contend with this. You know, your comments on Reddit from the past came up. Issue of your tattoo became infamous because of the link to a Nazi symbol. And you've apologized repeatedly. How do you view the notion of what mistakes people can make and then still hold positions of real responsibility like Senate?
Well, I think, one, did you do it when you were in power?
Hmm.
I mean, I think that that's a really important thing. That if someone knows that that what they say has so much gravity because other people are paying attention, like how do you use that? How do you act in that manner? I do think that if we're going to, I'm an elder millennial. I'm 41.
Hmm.
If we're going to rehash everyone's social media posts from their existence, people from my generation, I don't know what politics is going to look like. We'll just never we'll never get around to the policy part. So I think that there is I mean there if someone spends 20 years being an avowed white supremacist,
Hmm.
yeah, that's probably a sign. If someone over the course of their time on the internet uses slurs or stupid language and then ceases to do so, probably a sign of growth, probably a sign of how many of us change over
How
time.
old were you when you were making these comments on Reddit, and how do you look back on them?
I'm in my late 20s, early 30s.
Hmm.
And I mean, like I was,
Is that not old enough to know better?
well, I mean, I get it. Which comment do you mean? I made a lot of comments that I'm not like ashamed of. It's not as though I have this ream of comments in which I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I was a terrible person back then. So I guess
Well, comments about victims of sexual assault, for example.
yeah, well, one, that comment, I made that right when I
Hmm.
got out of the infantry.
Hmm.
And I mean, I don't know if you've read it, but
Oh, sure I have.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the comment is that I said that people, men and women, shouldn't get too drunk and should take some personal responsibility. I don't. I also said that sexual assault didn't occur in the military as much as people said it did.
Hmm.
It does. I learned that very quickly. I came out of the infantry. At the time, it was a male-only organization. I never interacted with it in the service. So for me, those comments were very much informed by my immature mindset coming out of my, frankly, 20s in the combat infantry. I then very quickly met people and had conversations and realized that I was very incorrect. Sexual assault occurred often in the military and was often covered up. But yeah, I mean, I think, those comments I made were at a time in my life where I came out of the combat infantry.
When you decided to run for the Senate, which is a gigantic leap for anybody, much less somebody who hasn't been in politics for a long time or conventional politics, did you think to yourself, I'm going to have a problem because of these past comments?
No. Uh, If you if you believe in transformational politics, which I
Hmm.
do, you need to believe in the ability for people to change, for people to grow. If we are all just ossified in who we are right now,
Hmm.
then there is no point to this. If we can't ever give people the ability to change minds, if we can't give people the ability to grow as human beings, then we're all just stuck. I mean, but we also know this isn't true. People grow all the time. And for me, this, as uncomfortable as it is and
Yeah.
personally unenjoyable to have to talk about stupid things I said on the internet 13 years ago, it also allows me to publicly model something that I think is really important, which is that a lot of us go through transitions in life. A lot of us change our minds, have new experiences, meet new people, are informed by those experiences and come to different conclusions. Our politics change, our views on the world change. And again, while it's not fun to do this for me, uh, it also really gives me the opportunity to very publicly show that you can believe things once and then you can, over time, believe other things. You can change your language, change the way you think about stuff, change the way you talk. And I think that's a good thing to model. I think it's, and that isn't something that you should be ashamed of. You should be able to be proud of the fact that you can turn into a different kind of person. You can think about the world in a different way.
I want to get into how you see the world, and I want to get a sense of how you see the Democratic Party these days and what you intend to do to help transform it.
I think the Democratic Party today's biggest problem is that there is an element of it that has become as attached to corporate interests as the Republican Party is. And by the way, this isn't just like my opinion. I mean, everybody thinks this. Everybody, where you hear people say things like, I don't vote because it doesn't matter. Both sides are the same, all that kind of stuff. And I don't agree with that. I mean, there's a reason I'm running as a Democrat. There's a reason I'm running. If I thought that none of this, if there was no hope, I wouldn't do this. I have an immense amount of hope. However, I do think that there is an innate contradiction in trying to be a party that represents working people, representing those that struggle, those that labor, those that are often exploited or taken advantage of. It is impossible to represent their interests while also trying to represent the interests of those that exploit them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that is a fundamental contradiction that you cannot get past. And my problem is that the Democratic Party used to be the party that represented those people. It was the party of labor unions. It was the party of thinking of large structural change that brought about things like Social Security or Medicaid and Medicare. It was the party that understood that protecting working people was going to require some form of imposition on those with wealth and power.
When do you think the Democratic Party, in your view, abandoned that?
In the 1990s.
In the Clinton administration.
I think that, I think the lesson that was learned after Reagan was that, and it was I believe it was the wrong lesson, but it's other people can disagree. The lesson that was learned was that the money matters. And we do have to kind of lean into this government's bad. We should lean into the kind of deregulation corporate side of things. And in doing so, the party sold out organized labor. And the party in many ways sold out that the movement side.
Did you feel that Barack Obama, for example, was in the same camp as Bill Clinton?
Yeah.
In that way?
I think so. I mean, 2008 financial crisis happens, right? There was a moment. I mean, and Obama's on record saying this. There was a moment where there were two options. We give money to homeowners or we give money to the banks. And we chose to give the money to the banks.
To rescue the banks, yeah.
To rescue the banks. And that was an option. There was for me, that's just kind of indicative of this creeping influence in the Democratic Party where we find ourselves, and this is, I think, why we often find ourselves in this weird, everybody's so confused as to what we're trying to do, because we go from we have Zoran Mamdani on one end and Joe Manchin on the other.
The argument, which you well know, is that the only kind of Democrat that's going to win in West Virginia is a Joe Manchin Democrat. Otherwise, you're going to get a MAGA Republican in West Virginia.
My counter to that,
sure,
is that I think you can win someone in West Virginia if you run on working class populism. But Joe Manchin also very much did not represent he's the reason that we didn't get, or we couldn't renew the child tax credit. And then we just chose not to continue doing that. That's not the behavior of someone that's representing the interests of working people.
Are you getting a lot of love from the leader of the Senate caucus, from Chuck Schumer?
No, I am not.
How would you describe the lack of love there?
It's just been a lack of anything. I've made it very clear that I would love to have a conversation, would love to talk about what we're trying to do here. No one's reached out. We're almost 5 months into this thing. Not a single phone call, not a single email.
From the National Party organization.
From either Chuck Schumer or from the DSCC and
the Senatorial Campaign Committee.
I continue to not have been contacted.
Governor Janet Mills has decided to run, and you've got a hot race there. Is she getting the love from the Democratic Party establishment? Well,
the DSCC set up to fundraise with her the day after she announced, so my assumption is yes.
It looks like Schumer and the DSCC is going to endorse Janet Mills in the primary, and you've got endorsements from Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna and others. How does that look on the ground in Maine? What are Maine Democrats actually feeling? How are the polls looking for you? Where are you having success? Where are you having difficulties?
To be frank, the polls continue to be great for us. And that mirrors what I feel on the ground. Like people are fed up. People are disgusted with the system as it stands. And they don't think that the answers are going to come from establishment politicians who've been chosen by Washington, D.C.
How will you run against Susan Collins, presuming that she's the Republican nominee? And she's been in that office for a very long time, and incumbents have all kinds of advantages.
Essentially the exact same way. We are building a campaign that is focused on field organizing. We're focused on building the ground game. We've held 35 town halls around the state of Maine the past couple months. We've talked to tens of thousands of Mainers already. We have 12,000 volunteers. Maine's not a big state. Well, it is geographically, but it doesn't have a lot of people. And these people are from all over the state. We've got folks coming down from Aroostook County. So it is for me, this is very much it's a larger project than merely a Senate seat. This is about rebuilding organization in communities, organization and cooperation between existing groups like labor unions, community organizations, the party itself. In my opinion, we need to reconnect with that kind of politics, the politics of movement building. And that speaks to what people are feeling right now. People, myself included, I mean, why I'm doing this, we feel unrepresented.
What do you want to get done in the Senate? What are, say, 3 top policies that you would concentrate on? Because you can't concentrate on everything.
No. Continue pushing for universal health care, Medicare for all. We also need to restrict the ability of senators and congresspeople to trade stocks and bonds. It's essentially legalized corruption, and it needs to end. And we also need to fix the tax code. Because we cannot continue to tax wages at a higher rate than we tax wealth. That's a math equation that when you run to the end, it's easy to see who winds up with all the money. So I think those 3 things are going to be priorities for me legislatively. I know Medicare for all is going to be a heavy lift. The other 2, I think, are going to be a much easier lift. I mean, we've already got some Republicans who are happy to come over on the stocks and bonds issue. Josh Hawley put something forward not too long ago. So I think there's definitely opportunity for wins there.
Now, you've run an ad talking about how you refuse to accept money from AIPAC. Are there any other groups that you won't take money from?
Oh, yeah. Fossil fuel PACs. I mean, frankly, any large corporate PAC, any dark money PAC, we don't take money from them. All the money we're taking in is individual donations. We will take money from labor PACs, any kind of PAC that exists that's kind of, not part of the corporate dark money apparatus, but that's it. So we need to know where the money comes from. That's important for us.
I want to ask you a couple of questions in view of your military experience. We had former Secretary of Defense and former head of the CIA, Leon Panetta, on the show recently. And he said this about having thousands of troops stationed off the coast of Venezuela. We're putting our men and women in uniform in harm's way. We have to assure them that the orders we give them are not going to violate the law, but we're going to, in fact, defend our national security in a way that is not legally questionable. What do you make of this, especially coming from someone who saw America's forever wars really up close?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, at this point, what we're seeing in Venezuela is just a rehash of what we saw with Iraq, but somehow even worse and even dumber, which is magnificent to behold.
How is it even worse and even dumber?
I mean, with Iraq, we at least had, 10 years of previous engagement. We had UN hearings. It was at least this sort of well-crafted propaganda machine that a lot of people ate up. And this is just laughable. We're just murdering people. I think the death count now is up to 95.
Yeah.
We're just murdering people. No declaration of war. No even concept of why this is a war. And it's all happening, frankly, because the Republicans know that their policies are failing. The economy is getting worse. People are not happy. And the best thing to do is just drum up a war for political purposes. And I think, a lot of people can see it, including a lot of Republicans. And that's what I mean by dumber. It's it's less sophisticated. The run up to the Iraq War, I think, was a sophisticated operation in propaganda. This is just, they realize they have the power and they can do it. And so they're doing it. And that's it.
How long were you in the military, active?
8 years, though. Well, I was 4 years in the Marine Corps, 4 years in the United States Army National Guard.
With that experience behind you, you've seen a lot of military leaders on the ground, and you've experienced them from afar as well. When you look at Pete Hegseth, who's the Secretary of Defense, or he calls himself Secretary of War, what view do you have of him?
I view a guy who is deeply insecure about his military service.
Why would he be insecure about his military service?
I don't know. I'm always curious about that. I mean, look, he was an infantry officer. He served at Guantanamo, and I think he did a deployment to Iraq. Not every deployment to Iraq is the same as other deployments to Iraq. I'm not sure what his was like. But you definitely get the feeling that this is someone who is trying to make up for something, is trying to be this like vision of masculinity and warrior prowess that he, frankly, does not represent at all. If he did, why didn't he stay in? Why didn't he continue? Why didn't he go be a special forces officer? They're like, there were other places in the service to go to really embody that. And he didn't. He got out and became a talking head on television. And I get the vibe that, there's a bit of insecurity about that. And now he gets to be in a place of power to make up for it.
What was your deployment like?
Oh, I did 4.
Yeah.
2 of them were fairly violent. One of them was kind of violent.
What does that mean?
Well, that's a good question. I was in Ramadi in 2006 with 3rd Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. That was a very, very violent deployment. You were
in active combat.
Yeah, we were at the government center in downtown Ramadi. It was a place that was the government center for Al Anbar province. So if you had a grievance with the coalition or the Iraqi government, you came down and expressed it, generally using direct fire RPGs or suicide car bombs. So that was.
So you were in the line of fire for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I was a machine gunner. So yeah, I mean, I usually say I saw more combat than most, less than some. So.
There are currently 20 members of the Senate who are veterans. What do you think you all could be doing, assuming you get elected, and you darn well might? What should you be pushing for in terms of legislation for soldiers and veterans?
Well, I think the number one thing we have to do is claw war powers back from the executive branch. I mean, this is something that is.
This has been going on for decades.
As ridiculous as what's happening in Venezuela is right now, we have to remind ourselves that this is the outcome of Congress abdicating its role in war making. We have handed off more and more power to the executive branch over decades. And now we're at a point where they're just dropping bombs on people's boats. And that shouldn't even be an option, but it is, because we've let it become one. So I'm a firm believer that we need to be passing legislation that is going to make clear that congressional input is necessary for military action. We cannot continue to go down this road. And also, I mean, it's a constitutional duty. The Constitution lays out clearly who is supposed to be in charge of war powers. And it is the bodies that represent the American people most directly, which is Congress.
We have a fair number of senators and congresspeople that come on this show, and I invariably ask them about if this job is so awful, and they all complain about it. They're one of many. They can't get anything done. There's no party discipline. The list is very long. Their list of frustrations is endless, and yet no one seems to want to give it up. Very, very few. Very, very few. And in the Republican Party, if you look at it and the MAGA movement and how it has pushed people into being something they might not have been 10 years ago, they're willing to give up some chunk of their soul. So what makes you believe you can come to Washington, put on a suit and a tie, if that's what you choose to do?
I will, for the
unless
record.
You're not going to go the Fetterman route.
Well, I mean, I would like to be a senator that accomplishes things, and to do that, you have to be on the floor at some point. So,
Fair enough. But what makes you think that you, as one of 100 people and as a junior senator, will be able to get much done?
Because I think we are coming into a different era in American politics. I think we are entering an era of I think we've already entered, actually, an era of American politics that in many ways is going to look a lot more like that of the late 19th and early 20th century than the last 50 years. We're entering into an era of politics of power, an understanding of what power actually is. It's not merely knowing the rule book. It's about understanding how to organize people and how to utilize a relationship between activists and organization on the ground and the more structural levers of power.
Where does Trump and Trumpism fit into your view of these eras of American politics? Is this a post-Trump era, or did Trump in his own way exploit that?
No, I think Trump exploited it. And the reason for it is much like the end of the Gilded Age. There is an immense amount of working class angst in this country, and for good reason. This is something that I find very telling. I go around the state of Maine.
What are people talking about to you?
Independents, Republicans, Democrats. If you ask any of them, do you think you live in a political or economic system that benefits you? Nobody says yes.
What would they have said 20 years ago?
I think 20 years ago, they probably would have said yes. Most of them might have said yes.
What changed?
What changed is the fact that life got harder down here. And we're also witnessing the ultra wealthy and corporate interests consolidate wealth and power in ways that we can hardly comprehend. I mean, everybody understands that everything is owned by 5 companies now, right? People know that. Go around, ask the average person, they know. People understand that the reason that their healthcare is collapsing here in rural Maine is because of corporate greed. That people are getting denied because an AI program gets run and tells them a life-saving procedure isn't covered. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the people that run those systems go home with millions of dollars. What changed is that we can see it. What changed is that us down here in the real world, we're not idiots. We're not, the wool has not been pulled over our eyes, and we're angry about it. And what Trump did is Trump came along and he told people that what they knew was true, which is that they are being robbed, that the system is not representing them. He's giving them all the wrong answers. He's laying the blame at the feet of all the wrong people. We understand. Those of us who I don't agree with anything Donald Trump does, except for maybe a little bit of nationalizing of some companies. If public money gets invested into a company, public ownership should come with it. Seems fair. But besides that, I don't agree with very much. However, I do understand why people voted for him. Like my neighbors voted for him. And I get it. It's because they're pissed. Because they feel like this whole thing does not represent them.
Have they stayed with him?
And it doesn't. It's cracking. I like the rising costs are just impossible to ignore. There's going to be an element of the base that's never going to leave them. But I think there are a lot of working people right now. They voted for change. He was a change candidate. Change did not come. Not in the way they wanted. I mean, we are watching our healthcare system in rural Maine collapse at the moment. Hospitals are closing as we speak. Services are diminishing. People's paychecks are going less far, and the housing crisis continues to be a problem in a rural state like this, which is wild.
When you look at it systemically, do you think the problem is distorted capitalism somehow, or is it natural to capitalism? And do you consider yourself a democratic socialist like Mamdani or Bernie Sanders?
I don't consider myself a democratic socialist. I do say that I certainly have a critique of capitalism.
But would it be possible to have a viable political career in the state of Maine if you did call yourself a democratic socialist?
Well, probably.
It would.
But it's not it's not my politics.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is that we need to engage with our economic system in a way that does not allow the worst version of it to run rampant, which is essentially where we are right now. Whether it's through taxation, whether it's through regulatory structures, whether it's through anti-monopoly law, which we already have on the books, we just choose not to enforce. These are mechanisms that we need to be utilizing to make our system not be one that is purely built on the exploitation of working people, which is what we have right now.
Tell me about your own life. You say you and your wife have an income of $60,000?
Yeah, roughly in the aggregate.
What's your experience of, not to put a too fine a point on it, what's your experience of being screwed by the system in recent years?
I mean, when I got out of the service, I was going to college on the GI Bill, and I was.
Where'd you go?
I went to George Washington down in D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a moment where I at the time I still wanted to go work for an intelligence service or maybe federal law enforcement. That was my kind of plan. Although because of my combat service, I became quite cynical and jaded and began to not want to do that anymore. So I was in school, and then living in Washington, D.C., I just became close enough to the power. I met people, I had interactions, and I was like, you're the ones I fought a war for? You guys?
What pissed you off?
Oh, I mean, the fact that like these people didn't seem to care about the human cost. To them, this was all political stuff. They were just making decisions based upon like, well, this might be good for us in the next election or something like that. And I'm like, people are dying. We're killing people. I mean, this is not like, the toll is not, it's not theoretical. The human cost is real. And yet in Washington, nobody seems to think like that. Well, there's some, but like on the whole, it really does seem that like all of this has just become so academic.
And when you got back to Maine and started building your life there, what was your experience as a veteran?
Oh no, and so this is why my politics are the way that they are. The reason my life is the way that it is because I am lucky enough to be a disabled combat veteran. I get health care. I don't think about it. I don't deal with insurance companies. I don't deal with copays or premiums. When I need help, when something feels a little funny, I go to the doctor and I do not think about the cost. It is provided to me by the VA. And if it wasn't for that support, I would not have been able to build the life I lived. But because I didn't have to go get a job that was going to provide me with health insurance, that I then, so I could get treated for things, it gave me an immense amount of freedom. It gave me the freedom to take some time and think about what kind of life do I actually want to live. And I found that I wanted to work on the ocean. And then I got to put the time into working on the sea. I became a diver. I became an oyster farmer. I got to learn the skills, how to fix outboard engines, how to do fiberglass work, how to dive in the cold and murky waters of the Gulf of Maine. Technical skills, real things that take a lot of time and commitment, quite frankly, to mastering. I got to do that because the VA gave me health care. And I look around at a community that I'm from, where I was born and raised, full of extremely hardworking, creative people who don't get to start those businesses, who don't get to figure out how they want to live, who don't get this kind of freedom to live a life that fulfills them, that brings them dignity. Instead, they are stuck just scraping by, trying to make it, trying to afford rent.
And in your area, what does scraping by look like?
I have a friend of mine. She works 3 jobs. Her rent is 60% of her monthly income.
Jesus.
And her rent just went up because rent everywhere is going up. But the reason she told me is because she's thinking about moving. The problem is she doesn't know where to move to.
Yeah, where would you go to?
Exactly. I mean, this is Eastern Maine. I mean, we're a poor community. There are already not a lot of options. And the fact that people here are struggling and can't make it, like, where does somebody with that kind of income go? Where else in the state or the country is she going to go? And more importantly, why should she have to go anywhere? This is where she's from. This is her home. And I refuse to believe that I've watched people in my community watch their material conditions deteriorate at the exact same time that we watch Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk exist. I refuse to believe that these two things are not connected. I'm sorry. I just can't. I fundamentally cannot believe that I'm watching my community suffer and become harder and harder to live in for working people while we watch the richest people in the history of people exist. Those two things are not disconnected.
Graham Platner, thank you so much.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
Now, are you the kind of oyster guy who is so sick of oysters you can't stand the sight of them, or do you eat them all the time?
No, I eat them all the time.
Straight up?
Straight up.
Okay.
No, with lots
no
of
cocktail sauce bullshit. None of that.
Cocktail sauce is heresy.
I agree. Okay.
I will allow occasionally maybe a spritz of lemon or some mignonette. Mignonette can be quite nice.
Gotcha. Okay.